Yes, please. Okay, guys.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for allowing me to be with you. When Nina told me about this retreat, I got really excited just because, as a Coptic person, anybody here not attended a retreat before? It was like your first Coptic retreat of all time? Welcome. I've been to a couple of retreats throughout my life as a Coptic person because that's like requirement. I think when you're a baby, you come out, you go to a retreat. That's what happens. But this is my first type of retreat that's a little bit different, I feel. This is a little, the focus on here has been different. If I want to hear about the weekend has been different. So that's why I'm excited. And I hope you're excited too. I know you've had a long day. You've had a lot of brainstorming, a lot of cool stuff. But I hope you can be excited for the next like 25 minutes while I'm excited with you too. So just a quick thing about me. My name's Mina, like probably half of you. The other half, Marina. So, and I'm a psychiatrist, which means I'm a medical doctor, I prescribe medicine, and I also talk and stuff. We do counseling, therapy, along with that. So, the biggest passion I have in life is Christ and how he can be the meaningful solution to most of our ailments, physical, mental, spiritual. And one of the greatest gifts he's ever given us is this whole little science of psychology, psychiatry. And one of the coolest things that we can possibly imagine is when the two worlds that look like they don't talk to each other, which is like the medical world, the psychology world, and the church world can come together and talk. A lot can happen. So that's why that's the intro part of why I'm excited, but you feel the same way probably. Our topic for today, like you saw on the schedule, is self-actualization. But our sub kind of title is check yourself. Anybody know what this is? You gotta check yourself before you
Wreck yourself.
wreck yourself. Okay, so we will not be wrecking ourselves today. And our focus will be how to check ourselves, and we're going to talk about something. Specifically, something that is responsible for up to 58% of your job performance. That's a big percentage. Anybody here have a job? Anybody here plan on having a job? Cool, but most of us probably. It's hard to think of so much. Oh, okay, got it. So I'll tell you specifically what we're going to talk about. Before I do this, what I want to tell you. This is something that's so important. What could possibly be so important that it affects up to 60% of your job performance? This isn't like a job seminar retreat, but maybe it's important. Also, this is not a self-help, like how to make money retreat, but if something, on average, if you're better at this, you earn, on average, $29,000 more than you would. Ooh, sounds good. So far, sounds interesting. Even more important than money or job performance is that studies show that this thing produces, you're more happy, you're healthier meaning specifically the metrics of all-cause mortality, the metrics of your immune system, like several things across the board. You're healthier, you have more successful relationships. Anybody, does this pique your interest so far? Does it sound like, all right, maybe I'm glad I came to Solo. I'm glad I came to this retreat. There's something good that's happening here. What we're going to talk about in ways of self-actualization is this idea of emotional intelligence. Some people here have heard that before. Good, right? It's becoming more and more popular, both in the scientific world as well as the business world, because they're realizing one core thing that we're going to focus on in this talk, which is our topic of our talk, but that one piece fits into this big picture. This big picture, as you see on the top, when you were younger, or when we were younger, we used to always hear like the way to excel in life is to like be smarter than the other kid, right? You want to like outsmart other people. Maybe though we realize as we grow older, being smarter than people is not always the most important thing in life. Let me give you an example. You guys said you have a job currently or you've had a job before. Has anybody here had a job position where there's somebody above you that you felt like, this person doesn't seem all that bright? I don't know how they got to that position. Right? Nobody currently, of course, because you're all very happy where you are. Sometimes the key factor for that, why that person is where they are, is an emotional component. How about the opposite? Have you ever felt, God bless you, you ever felt like, you know what, look at yourself, like I'm pretty smart, I'm Coptic, I go to church, I have a lot of things going on, but it seems like relationships, when I try to do the relationship thing, like with other people, just regular relationship interactions, things fall apart. It doesn't make sense. I think I'm making the right decisions, but it doesn't really turn out the way they should. I think should. Or the way that you're advancing at work, or the way that things are progressing with your friendships, or even spiritual growth to some degree. You feel like, hey, how come I've been doing the same thing for as long as I can be? I'm putting in time, retreat after retreat. I'm getting my bracelet. I have a little collection at home of all the retreat bracelets, and then I have the same result. That's what we're going to talk about today. One core principle of EQ. And here's our theme verse for the time. Anyone want to read this verse for us out loud? We're all close. Read.
Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. Proverbs 4:23.
Very good. So in our church, in the Orthodox Church, there's this large field of study. Have you ever heard of this idea of the eyes of the heart, or the nous, right? And it's the church fathers focus on this idea of how you guard your heart. Like, if you go to any monastery and you sit with like a real deep monk, this was my experience when I sat with a monk. He said the most important thing, if I'm going to tell you anything that's important, of value, is the skill of guarding your heart. So like, oh, I'm doing that, sounds really spiritual. So I don't get myself emotionally vulnerable. He's like, no, understanding that from your heart, every issue in your life, every difficulty has root in where your heart is. Here's the problem. A lot of us are not even aware of what's going on in there. And it's hard sometimes to look in the mirror, like my little mouse friend over here. Because sometimes when you look, you don't like what you see. So you say like, I'm not going to look in there. I'm just going to assume I'm having a problem with friends. So where's the problem? Them. Right? I'm having a problem at work. People come to me in the office all the time and say, my boss is a jerk. That could very well be true. So what do you want me to do? Change my boss? Show them how much they're a jerk and they should treat me differently. Okay. A big focus sometimes in therapy, counseling, is we want to change what we can change, which is only who's in the room. It's hard for me to teleport to your boss and kick him or something. Think back with me for a second. Let's be honest with each other. The last time you had a problem, any issue, interpersonally, work-wise, or whatever, was your first thought, how did I contribute to this issue? Or was your first thought, like me, how did they do this? How could they have done this to me? See what I'm saying? See the difference? We're going to talk about this in more detail. Here's the thing. But this doesn't apply to everybody. We got issues. When I say we got issues, because when the verse tells us, when Solomon in his wisdom says, guard your heart, because out of it come the issues of life, the issues in our relationships, the issues in our work, the issues in our church. Not everybody has issues, though, because it depends. Like, when you think about your upbringing, most of you probably had perfect parents, unless they were Egyptian. Like, anybody has right? And this only would apply to you if your parents were not perfect. So I don't know if it applies to anybody in the room. Most of us, it wouldn't apply to us unless we had perfect siblings. Most of us, this wouldn't apply to us. There's got to be someone out there, right? If we had a perfect childhood, perfect, no problem, no issues, no trauma, nobody ever looked at you funny, said something funny to you, look at your hair, or your eyes, or your Egyptianness. I came to America when I was 10, so there was going to be a lot of like, oh, why aren't you guys the same way as we are back home? Why are you speaking a different language? Thank God I learned the language eventually. We have issues. This is kind of the first point of self-realization. If we can all exhale together and say, we've all got some. We've all got some. The more we are willing to say, we got some because our parents, lovely as they are not perfect. Our upbringing, lovely as it was not perfect. Our friendships, supportive as they are, were not perfect. Every stage of your life contributed to where your heart is now and how issues are flowing out of your heart. So understand this. Here's the kind of analogy that I heard once and I thought it kind of sticks. Let's say someone does something to me that's not great. I mean, over here. You like takes the microwave. Let's say this is something in my life, a scale of like 1 to 10, 10 being like I got murdered, 1 being someone took away my water. This is like a 3. Took my mic, come on, I'm in the middle of talking. I wouldn't take your shorts, like, it's not nice. Say I react to him as if I got murdered on a 10, and we get into a fist fight. I'm not saying this has ever happened before to 2 Egyptian men overreacting to each other and having things go wild. If that was to happen, would you say, is the thing that he did right? No. Is it a 3? Yes. Is it a 10?
No.
So where did the 3 to 10 come from? It's a 3 offense, and I reacted as a 10. Where did the 7, right? 10 minus 3, 7? Math is not much.
Perception.
Perception? Did it come from him? Where did it come from? Come from the issue of my heart. Maybe the issue of my heart is like, I'm a guy. What are you? Macho, you know? Don't compete with me. I'm a big macho. Think back to the last conflict you had and quantify it. Maybe this is a good workshop activity that you can do later. Doesn't have to be the last one. Has there been a conflict in your life before where if you quantified it, this is a 4? If you quantified it, this is a 5. If you're reacting to it, you're reacting 27. Does that ever happen? Or is it just me? Right? To know the difference between the two in self-actualization, self-realization, is to know that the rest, the difference there, is your heart. So we got issues. So here's what we're going to talk about. This guy, Harvard guy, he said this idea is this: if your emotion abilities are in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, which is what we're going to talk about, this self-awareness is one key principle of emotional intelligence. If you're not able to manage addressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. And this would apply for a lot of things. Sometimes we don't have an emotionally healthy spirituality. No matter how smart you are, no matter how spiritual you are, that's why I have a whole stack of books that I'll show you guys in a second. Oh, it's behind. So I'll show you. We can talk about them in more detail, but they're nice books that I would recommend you peruse through. Generally, in the Orthodox Christian kind of monastic literature, this idea of being aware of your emotion is so central. And then this idea of being aware of your emotions in the psychology literature, obviously central too. The point of this little slide is that this is so important that it can trump sometimes how hard you work. It can trump sometimes how smart we are. It can trump sometimes our natural ability. It can trump sometimes so many other little factors, and it can leave us feeling frustrated when you have something in the middle. All of us right now know someone who you would say, you know what, that person is not very self-aware. Can you think of kind of example? I know friends of mine, let's say, larger fellas, we're always very like jokingly would like sit on you maybe or give you a punch. Oh man, you're 400 pounds, you can't just like casually sit on each other. There's a difference to this, you know what I mean? Right? Your self-awareness of your physique is not really there. Sometimes we can have a lack of self-awareness also of our emotions. So here's what we're going to do for the next couple minutes. We're going to look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror there, sometimes, like I said, it may be hard to look, but it's essential. And we're going to use this we're using the mirror in difficult times. We're going to see both the cause and the resolution. Here's the big picture of emotional intelligence. For the sake of time and not to bore you, we're just going to talk about 1 and maybe 2. Self-awareness and a little bit about self-management. We're not going to talk about so much about social awareness or relationship management, but the big picture in the model is self-awareness is knowing what your emotions are. And we'll talk about why that can sound easy, but it may be harder than it seems. And then, what do you do about those emotions? And then, how those emotions look in other people. And then lastly, how that affects your relationships. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Another kind of intro in terms of what emotional intelligence is. We know that biologically you have this battle in your brain between the rational brain, so to speak, and the emotional brain. The part of your brain that's making decisions on a rational standpoint, and the part that's more instinct, that's more fight or flight, that's more, I'm overwhelmed, so I'm going to do this, or you just react. And the idea of emotional intelligence is to kind of link and balance the two. Here's another little quote for you. This is the growing body of research findings that scientifically demonstrate that emotional intelligence predicts how well we perform at home, school, workplace, and I would argue even church. How well we can serve God. If we're emotionally healthy, we'll be able to serve God in a better way. The same way that I had a priest friend of mine who at some point in his life said, you know, I'm a little out of shape. I said, well, that's okay. Like priests, but the black hides everything. Like, don't, it's very, very slimming, you know? But he decided, no, like in order for me to serve God better and like long term be more useful to him, I have to be in better shape. So he lost a lot of weight. I thought, wow, that's really cool. It's really good motivation for Abuna. I should do the same. So his thought process about physically being more able to be used by God, like I'll be around longer, I'll have more energy. The same idea for us emotion. If you're less temperamental when you are around other people and serving people, or if you have a better idea of what you're feeling and how that affects people, you're more efficient as a servant. The foundation of it is that when you're self-aware, that helps you have better coping skills, that helps you have better interpersonal skills, that leads to more effective relationships and better interpersonal effectiveness overall. That's what we want to get to all the way to end. The self-actualization, to kind of know who we actually are in the way that God has made us to be. Does that make sense? That's the progression, that's kind of the ladder. Feel free to stop me at any point with like questions, or we can do it at the end. A quick difference between when we talk about emotional intelligence versus, I won't belabor this too much because I want to get to the actual part. The big thing that I want you to notice is that your IQ generally, how smart you are, doesn't really change. If you happen to be a gifted prodigy, like Mina, like you just, that's it. You're born with an IQ of 200. Come on, you just, he's like, any Mina in the crowd. You're all, and any Marina, all of you just gifted. No, but if you happen to have a gifted IQ, that's just the way the cookie crumbled. And you won the genetic lottery, and you have an IQ of 160. That's the way it is. Your emotional intelligence is not like that. You can begin like stumbling your way through, and then you can end having mastered the way, not mastered, but as close to it as you can, the way you think and the way those thoughts and emotions affect other people. So that's the big take home that I wanted to kind of focus on for this one. Not often understood, it promotes healthy relationships, and it can be changed. In our hospital, when we have a new person interviewing for a job, we have like an OG psychologist guy who's like the second coming of Freud. He's just like an intimidating old shrink, right? So when he meets someone, he says, hey, nice to meet you. Who are you? And you're like, I'm Mina. Like, no, I don't want to know your name. I want to know who are you. And people just, almost 100% of the time. Because what do you say to that? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Sleep. Who are you? Who are you? Why are you sleeping? I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Just can't help myself. Right? So think about that. So it's an intimidating question because it would take for us to be able to say, I've spent a lot of time studying stuff, information, breaking news, what trends on your Facebook newsfeed. Sometimes we haven't spent as much time on our newsfeed as we have in understanding who we are. So think about that for a second. If you were put on the spot like that, and you had to answer, hey, who are you? How you would answer it? Talking about this, the findings generally are positive and that there's a balance between emotion and reason, and then it can lead to empathy and compassion. Now let's jump into it. Let's jump into self-awareness, this key idea. This idea of when you look in the mirror, what is it that you find? And is what you find accurate? I know you guys talked about the gnats before and kind of these distortions in our thinking, right? Sometimes we have distortions like this kind of distortion is a very like Coptic dude kind of distortion. Like I'm just, I look at myself like, wow, amazing. How did you do that? How do you, right? Sometimes we can have the opposite kind of distortion though. You could be a lion and look in the mirror and see a little cat. It's like, bro, you're not a little cat. You know, you're something bigger than that. Same dude, same Harvard guy. So self-awareness means, if you have to put a definition to it, is having a deep understanding of one's emotions and how those feelings affect you. Here's the thing. First component is recognizing your own emotions and their affect, and then accurate self-assessment, knowing your strengths and limits, and then self-confidence that comes from that. When you know your own weaknesses and when you know your own strengths, that gives you a better ability to have your own self-worth, your own self-understanding of capability. Here's the thing. This sounds easy, right? This sounds like we should have known this in like 3rd grade. Right? Let me tell you something. I've had a lot of people come to me sometimes in my office and describe a situation and then say, I did this thing where I lost control. Okay, so what were you feeling at that time? I don't know. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? I didn't really think about it, I just reacted. Have you ever had that reaction? Where you didn't think, you just reacted? And then even if you have to reflect back and say, what was I feeling at that time? I don't know. I couldn't put a thought to it. And then even when you do put a feeling to it, you label it. When you ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And you reflect on this behavior. I've had this a lot where someone will say to me, I was really angry. Okay. Angry sometimes can be the blanket on top. Beneath it can be something else. Beneath the anger, you were hurt. Beneath the anger, you felt betrayed. Beneath the anger, you felt something else. See what I'm saying? Like anything else, sometimes I feel like maybe emojis have helped us along in time. When you're texting people, are you always using the same 5 emojis? Right? I feel this. It's either the really happy guy or the really sad guy. It's the same little group of feelings. And sometimes our emotional vocabulary becomes stunted. What's my feeling? I'm either really happy, or really mad, or really gassy. I don't know, it's one of the 3, some combination thereof. It takes practice to think and say, okay, no, but really, why did I react that way? Really, what was going through my heart? And it doesn't just take practice, but it also takes prayer. David is one of the masters, I think, of emotional intelligence in the scriptures. Because he walks you through the full gambit of emotional, turmoil in the Psalms. And he says this to the Lord. He says, Lord, search me. Search me. Have you ever lost something and really searched for stuff? I'm talking you lost your phone. Things are getting thrown, nothing is safe. You're throwing your parents out, nobody's safe at home if you can't find your phone. And of course it's in your hand. That whole search. He says, search me, oh God. He says, search me. Why? Because there's stuff in there, like we said, there's issues, deep, deep, deep issues, that unless God begins to reveal to you, they're hard for you to know that's the feeling. Unless God begins to reveal to you that maybe the way that you were reacting with an authority figure at work is related maybe to an upbringing with your parents, unless God maybe begins to reveal to you that a traumatic experience in your life made you lose trust in other people, and that's the reason you're reacting the way you are, it's hard to do things differently. See what I'm saying? You get caught in the same cycle. That's why David says, search me, know my heart, because he wants God to know his heart. And then he says, try me and know my anxieties. He wants God to know his anxieties. This was David's desire. And if you get nothing else out of our time together, I would invite you to commit this verse to memory and have it be a prayer that you at least pray this weekend. Just say, God, search me. Know my heart. Reveal my anxieties. Open that up. A little heart surgery over the weekend. Because let me tell you, the honest truth, we're going to celebrate Pentecost, there is no psychology in the world that can do a greater work in us than the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit has given us also the signs that we're working with here this weekend. But it begins by us coming to God in prayer and saying, search me, God. And then it leads them from thereafter and saying, okay, God, now that you've searched me, you've shown me what's up. Having the courage to act on it. Make sense? Self-exam. So in order to have a self-realization, in order to have a self-awareness, you gotta have an actual, honest self-examination. Socrates, I think it's attributed to him, said the unexamined life is not one worth living. Anybody here, like when I was a teenager, I worked in like retail, I think. Or I worked in some little store. It was kind of a little tiny store. And it was very important for us to have inventory. How much mozzarella was there? Of course, I would sneak a block every now and then. Mozzarella's delicious. But how much mozzarella is there? How much tomato sauce? How much of the chicken breast so you can make beautiful chicken parm? Inventory for a restaurant is very important. When was the last time you took inventory in your life? Okay, what's really here? This past month, what's inside? What have I given out? What's left? Where are things coming from? You see what I'm saying? Inventory, it's as important for a retail store, for mozzarella, it's important for me and you. St. Shenouda says this. It says, let's sit every evening alone by ourselves and search our souls for what we presented to our guardian angel to offer the Lord. This was the advice of St. Shenouda because you got to be able to have time to reflect. Same way that you have beautiful like yoga time by the water, right? By the lake. Like you need to be able to have time where things are quiet and there is reflection. And that reflection begins to reveal to you what's going on inside. And sometimes, to be honest with you, we do this and we can't. Or we try, but we don't have a good result at the end of the day. We don't have honest assessment of our own selves. Because sometimes, a patient told me this the other day. She said to me, you know, Doc, like, you don't really know me. I said, I don't claim to. She was like, I can come in here and lie every time I talk to you. And I tell you the same lies I told myself. I said, you're really good at that. That ain't helping nobody. Have you caught yourself in a lie before? To yourself? Have you realized, you know what, I keep telling myself this, but I know it's not true. And I keep convincing myself this is the way it is, but I know it's not true. Sometimes a third party is really important for you. Whether that person is your father of confession, someone you can come to and be open with, bare your soul to them. Sometimes a therapist, that's part of their role. I want to throw in a slide here on how a therapist does this. I figured I'll give you a quick 1 minute for the sake of time. I didn't put it in the slide. What are the ways that a therapist, psychiatrist, or whatever, someone will come and do this and evaluate you? So I invite you to do the same in like a quick version. Is they'll do a history of your life and say, what were the things that you went through in your history and how did they impact your current behavior? They'll look at your developmental history, things when you were young. They'll look at the trauma history, things that impacted you that you didn't see coming. They'll look at medical issues that may be impacted also, because that also has a big factor too. Sometimes the way we behave is related to a medical ailment that could be subtle. Small vitamin deficiencies or something could affect the way we behave. The point is, they'll walk with you through the very beginning to get from the beginning to now to say, how did that affect you now? Does that make sense? So sometimes having a third party is really important in the self-exam process. And here's the thing, this is an important part too from Harvard Business Review, is they showed that this affects our commitment, our creativity, our quality of life and work, and what we do with the time that we have. Any questions so far on self-awareness? Before we jump into self-management, and then we'll close in like 5 minutes. In 5 minutes? Okay. Cool? Okay. Yes?
For self-awareness, you can have many perspectives of why you feel this way. You can come up with so many reasons. Are you supposed to do this alone, or do you recommend like doing this with someone? Like just thinking about your feelings, why you feel this way.
Yeah, good question. I would recommend first getting into a regular habit of doing this alone, so that you know, being as honest with yourself as you possibly can. Trying to say to yourself, I'm not going to trick myself into something that's false. And then secondly, I think it's really important to have a third party, whether that third party is initially your father of confession, or I'm of the mindset that we all deserve to have a therapist. We don't all need one, but we deserve one. So that could be a helpful part to say, okay, here's my inventory. Here's like, I've walked through this, I've evaluated my life, my upbringing, my trauma, my relationships, how I've reacted. Here's what I got. Help me make sense of that. So that's how it would go with that. First alone, and then with someone else.
There's something I want to
Sure.
comment about.
Yeah, please.
When anyone starts to do something like that, sometimes he will suddenly, and like a trick, will start to overthinking about the things that happen. So I think the better thing to do something like this while you're praying, while you're staying with God, and try to put all your emotions and the thoughts that you have when you have God beside you, like a friend.
Yes.
So that's, I think it will,
Hand in hand, kind of offset.
yes.
Absolutely true, but I'll have to also be honest with you about this. So there are people who are very, very spiritual, and I mean, as spiritual as it gets, monks, right? Monks, that's like very spiritual for us. It's always like the same. Who are also, huh?
Simply do it as simple as you can.
No. Yeah, no, I'm just making a different point. Because I agree with you. I'm not saying we should. Of course, doing it in prayer is like amazing. So definitely do that. But I'm just saying the part of when you get to the point of overthinking, where it gets to be now a dominating, repeating thought, that can happen even if you're very spiritual. Even if you're doing it in prayer, even if you're faithful in like the manner in which it's done. And then that becomes a point where now we need the other component, where it's not just the part with Abuna, it's not just the part with prayer, but now we also need a therapist involved. Because the overthinking now is not just a matter of, if I think a lot about myself, I'll start to overthink about myself. It doesn't exactly happen that way, I know what you're saying. But that is more of a symptom of something else. Now you're beginning to have a level of anxiety that produces overthinking, or a level of OCD that produces overthinking. Does that make sense? Not really.
Yes, it's a little, but
Kind
not
of.
that much. I
Not that
think.
much, okay. So let me clarify. So the first point is that for sure, when we want to examine ourselves, that's why we said in the beginning, the Psalm, right? Spirit of prayer, search me, God. Because only God can really reveal to us the inner parts of our heart. So we search ourselves in prayer, and we search ourselves with God. Once we do that though, if you begin to find that now you're becoming obsessive about something, or you're overthinking about something, and it's becoming it has having an impact on your function, that's when I encourage you to definitely have that third party involved, and that third party could be Abuna, but could also be a mental health professional, because now you're looking at a symptom, which this symptom could just be uncovered or could be there all along. And that symptom is better treated in full mental health treatment.
You can decide something like this when you give your time yourself like a time, a specific time, let's say, and that thing you can decide it, because some people they at this age sometimes they overfocus, sometimes they.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's fair to give yourself time.
Time, sure. Yeah.
Again.
That's always good, giving yourself time. But I guess my overarching point is that it's important to know that you're not going to be alone in that process. That you need to like begin alone but not end alone. That you need to know that there is a next step where it might be important to take this to someone else. Whether that lasts for a short time or not, because the assessment will begin to tell you that. Will tell you, you know what, yeah, it seems like you're overthinking, but this is still within normal kind of range of behavior, so it's okay. Hope that helps.
May I ask another
Yes,
question?
sure.
No, it's fine, I can. Okay. My voice is.
Sure.
Is it healthy to ask another person, another trusted person, how do you see me? This question, because sometimes maybe another one sees something in me I don't see, and I cannot talk حتى مع ربنا or even with anyone because I really don't see.
Right.
Is it advisable or it's not advisable?
I think it is advisable, both for us, from like the Orthodox standpoint in terms of koinonia and the fellowship of the believers and why we're together. That's why we do what we do, right? We iron sharpens iron. From the point of view, also from a psychological perspective, if it's someone that you trust, and if it's someone that we take their word, of course, with a grain of salt. Their word is not It's not God's word, right? It's not like, oh, this is it for sure. But it's important to have that perspective from someone that you know, whether that's a close friend, a family member, you know, that's valuable. That's very valuable, for sure. Yeah. You have a question too? Or for later? Further, okay. Okay, so we'll talk for a quick second about self-management. And it's basically what you do with self-awareness, for the sake of time. So, we talked a little bit before, I know you talked about the NATs, like the automatic thoughts. And here we're going to talk about having this inner dialogue with yourself. You know, when we were kids, did you ever have your parent when you were a kid tell you something and then you talk back to your parents? Like, nobody here, of course, but like, you know, sometimes you were rebellious, like, no, you do that, like, right? But oftentimes when we have a thought, we don't talk back to that thought. Thought says, you know, you're no good at anything. Yeah, I guess I'm no good at anything. The thought says, oh, like, nobody really cares about you. I guess nobody cares about me. Right? Self-management is the ability to have a dialogue back with yourself. How do you talk back to yourself in an effective way? That's our key. There's a beautiful book, one of the books that I want to show you here, I'm reading now. One church father's writer named Evagrius of Pontus kind of goes through this little guide of talking back. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is, and here's where I think sometimes is where psychology can fall short. If you're in CBT and in therapy and someone's going to tell you, here's how to talk back to your thought. Where are you going to get the content from to talk back? Oh, like nice things, or things from your value system. But the scripture tells us the way to find things to talk back, the way to have content, and the reason why I like this book is it breaks down by a thought. Okay, here's a thought of like being very sad and feeling there's no hope. Here are 100 verses from, you know, Genesis to Corinthians about that. Sometimes, I think I put a verse in here about this. Here's the verse, in verse 119, where David says, your words I hid in my heart so I wouldn't sin against you. Sometimes if you don't have something hidden in your heart, if you don't have any ammo, right? We hear about this a lot in Lent and Temptation Sunday, right? How did the Lord respond to temptation? It was all with quotes from one book, from Deuteronomy. He said this, boom, boom, boom. He wasn't responding to a thought. He was responding to Satan. But sometimes we don't respond to Satan or to our own thoughts with adequate material. What's your comeback? You have a thought that says to you, you're no good anyway. Well, I don't know. My mom told me that when I was a kid, so it's probably true. Oh, you know, you're funny looking. Maybe I am. You know, you're never going to get married. Well, shut up. Right? Is that the thought? Is that the response?
It's good enough.
It's good enough. It works. Or maybe there's a Bible verse for that has better content, that's more life-giving than just our own thought. So this is an art, the art of talking back to yourself. Because believe it or not, I was one time talking with a patient who's like the kindest, sweetest little person. And they were telling me the smack that they talk to themselves. I was like, lady, you're so nice to other people. Why are you so mean to yourself? She's like, I don't know. It's true. I was like, hear me out for a second. Any of those thoughts that you said to me, would you ever say this to another person? A stranger, a loved one, like Bin Laden, anybody? She's like, no, I would never. Like, so stop talking to yourself like that. Right? I didn't say it in those terms, but that's the point, is that you'd say things to yourself that you would never say to other people. So we got to develop better internal dialogue, and the content has to come from a better source than Twitter. All due respect to Twitter.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Do I, during this process, do I respect my feeling during this, or I am dealing with it as it's an enemy right now, and I'm trying to, putting the fact, faith, feeling, and the caboose of the healthy spirituality, what's
Yes.
talking about. So, how I deal with my feeling right now, is it an enemy, or it's a friend?
It's a good question. It's a good question. So, it's not so much, you guys all get what I'm just trying to say? When you identify your feeling, let's say that feeling is one where you're attacking yourself almost, it depends a little bit on the feeling as well. Because some feelings are neutral, right? Like the Psalm tells us, be angry, do not sin. There's an anger that sometimes can be, neutral. But there are some feelings that are by nature like attacks. There are some thoughts that are by nature invasive, counterattacks really by the devil. So if the feeling is you, for example, which is a common one, you are worthless. You have no value. Well, that one, that's not a neutral thought. That's a thought now that we're going to have, like we're getting ready to spar because there's combat. Because and I think the easier way to kind of gauge this, let's do on. Is this feeling something that is like a transient, a sadness, a happiness for the wrong reason, a temptation? Or is it a core, you're talking about core beliefs at some other point, that is directly opposed to the principles of God about us? And the common ones, the common core beliefs, that you're unlovable, nobody will ever love you. That's a combat feeling. That's a feeling, wait a minute. There's what God tells me about how lovable I am, and there's what this feeling is telling me that I am unlovable. No one will love me. Or there is this feeling that, again, I screw up everything. So of course, it is something wrong at work, and that's the feeling, is that I screw up everything. So I think that's the way we have to discern that. We have to discern that some feelings, we have to first acknowledge them, and this is the skill. Let me catch you for 1 second if you're sleeping. The skill that we want to do, because what Abuna is asking is very important, is you want to first be able to acknowledge your feeling, label your feeling, and then know what you're going to do about it. See what I'm saying? That's why I was in the beginning, okay, I'm angry. Is it just anger or what's going on underneath? So first to say, I know the feeling, I acknowledge it, and then I react to it, bless you, so that I can know what to do with that. Yes?
If I don't know what to do with that, can I just ignore it and not label it and ignore all the hassle?
That sounds like it's been working for you so far.
Yeah, because if I don't know what to do about it, then just might as well just not bring it up.
You know what? That's mad honest. That's fine. What's your name?
Mark.
Mark, I'm glad you're here.
Not all of the marks sound like me.
Glad you're here. Because you know what, Mark, what you're saying is exactly what we do all the time. You say, okay, it's a long process here, 3 steps. Okay, first one, what's the feeling? Disappointed. I'm really disappointed in myself and I think I'm a loser. Second one, I don't like this feeling. What do I do about it? I don't know. Eat? Is there pizza anywhere? I don't know. Right? The reason we stop with the third one is because we don't have the skill set to do anything about it. But that's why you're here. And that's why the idea is to do something different. And that will produce more emotional intelligence, that will produce more self-awareness, and later on, that will give you a better relationship with your spouse, give you a better relationship with people you work with, and will advance you further in life. That's one potential. The other direction is just do nothing, and things will be the same way as they are. So that's the choice that you have, that's the fork. I invite you though, the point of why you're here this weekend, getting your bracelets and t-shirts and stuff like that, is to not do that. Not do that. Like I might have a point where I was walking here and I twisted my ankle a little bit. So I look at my ankle and say, looks like it's hurt. What do I do about that? I guess run more. That might work or it might not work. See what I'm saying? The point of coming here is to have a skill set. And I think we're going to have to skip things and end for the sake of time. Does that make sense, Mark, though? Here's the four. Do nothing, continue with things as they are, or do things differently, develop a skill set for emotional intelligence. We're pretty much done. I'll skip. So empathy comes with, when you have this self-management, you're able to have better empathy with yourself and with others. So I'll skip that one, and building on empathy as well, we'll skip some motivation, we'll skip, I'll just show you the resources. So the ones that I wanted to show you that you can come in and see them, either there's one Christian CBT, which is nice, the author is really cool, I've spoken with it before. There's one book on Our Thoughts Determine Our Lives, and the one that I told you before about talking back. I want to give you my contact, and if you had any other general questions that we didn't cover. Yes?
And I wanna go back to that example where you said the person got angry and he added 10. So I've read something about brain hijacking.
Yeah,
So you don't go through your reasoning and then your brain gets hijacked and that's what you do.
yes.
So is that true and can you overcome something like that?
Very, very good question. So yes, that's true. And yes, you can overcome it. So the reason it's true is because, again, by and large, if you're making a decision, like you and me right now are thinking, saying, okay, should we have pizza or burgers? Pizza, right? If you're in a point where an emotional state is really heightened, and this is from like a biological standpoint, it can be helpful for you if you're, right, fight or flight, running from a tiger kind of thing. You don't want to be like, tigers. I don't know. There's the one from Aladdin who was really cool, right? You want to be like, right? So that's exactly what happens, is that you come to a point where your decision is not being made rationally by the rational part of your brain, your decision is being made emotionally. So there's definitely a way to overcome that, and it's a systematic way. And it's not something I can just tell you like in a second, but it'll tell you that it's, like anything else, a skill set. Right? In the same way that there's physical kind of muscles that you can build up, you can build up an emotional intelligence kind of muscle, and this is like a beautiful thing, both in spirituality and in like life. You know people who like don't get rattled quite as easily, right? We've all known those people. We all, like, I don't know how they do it, but like they're under pressure and they're not rattled. They're like Kawhi Leonard, like just like, like just very, right? So you have that, and that's a skill that we can develop, is in how to not be rattled under pressure, so that, not just pressure, but like life. So you're making more decisions from a rational standpoint as opposed to an emotional one, and you're not being hijacked, like you said. Any other questions, concerns? Yes,
This is a weird question, but
weird ones are good.
what if you're trying to sit down and put a label on your emotion and you just can't label it?
Yeah,
Like that first step.
yeah. That's a good question. So there's tools for that, because that's not as actually weird or as uncommon as you might think. If we sit down honestly and we try to label our emotions, eventually we're going to have a really hard time. There's a really good tool in DBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy, that can show you actually like a list of emotions, and it can show you ways to kind of label emotions. So the short answer is, don't think this is weird, and know that this is, again, something that takes a little bit of practice to develop, so that I can have a better understanding of my emotions. And the other short answer is that this is so common that it's actually systemized. And this is something that's like a type of therapy, and especially sometimes for us, if we feel like we oscillate between emotions a lot, like I feel one way here, one way there, I don't know the difference sometimes. So I would look that up if you're curious, of DBT, and being able to identify and label emotions is a whole module. Yes.
This is a question I always get posted on, but at what point would you recommend going to Abuna versus a therapist?
Yeah, good question. So Abuna should be like the standard, because you gotta go to Abuna for like lots of stuff, right? And actually the research tells us is that for people who are in a faith community, the first person they go to is often the faith leader. And one of the amazing things that are beginning to happen in our area, to be honest with you, is that Abunas are becoming very sophisticated in knowing, like, all right, absolve you, refer you, which is awesome. So, but if that decision is not going to be made by your Abuna, so my simple answer is always begin with your father of confession, because at least get a confession, get an absolution. But secondly, if I have to make the decision for myself, here are the categories of things that I think about when I think, okay, I want to get evaluated. Whatever the symptom is, I think about frequency, intensity, duration, and function. 4 like objective little criteria. Most important one that I want to think about, just if you don't remember all 4 because you fell asleep, the first one, heads came up all of a sudden. I wasn't even calling you out, I was just saying. Is function, right? And function meaning school or work or interpersonally, if whatever I'm feeling, anxiety, depression, trauma, like gas, again, whatever. See Elvis coming up, always something, right? So if that's the case, then I want someone to tell me, okay, no, this is, even though it's interfering with your function, but you're just having a bad day. I want someone else to tell me that if it's already impeding my function. The other three, frequency, we all have a bad day. But are you having a bad day every day? That's too frequent for it to be just a bad day. Intensity, we all have a bad day. Having a bad day and you're thinking about suicide? It's too intense. You need someone to tell you, no, like something else here. Duration, again, we all have a bad day, but is your bad day lasting 6 months? Then it's too long. Does that make sense? So frequency, intensity, duration, and function. I used to have like an acronym for them. I figured you guys are old enough for non-acronyms. You should remember. Most important function. Right, Mark? What were they?
Come on.
Come on.
Wait, do you know what we're talking about?
Function.
Sure. Function again is, let's say you are, 20 years old and you're in college. So what's the function in your life? What's the thing that you have to perform at? Function is the thing that you have to perform. School, I'm failing. Or, like, I'm a total genius, but I can't get an A because I can't study. So it's still impeding my function. But part of this is not just objective for everybody, it depends on you. Or my function, like at home. I used to get along pretty well with my parents. Now every time I get home, I want to like fight them all. Okay, then my function at home is not really solid. Or at church. But the main things that we usually look at are work and school. People interpersonally at work are telling you, hey man, you gotta take a nap or something. I don't know why you're so irritable, why are you so cranky? Could be a red flag of something functions. So work, school, big ones, but also look at interpersonally at home or with friends. No problem. Yes?
I guess this would be similar to her question, so. And then I thought about this a lot. At what point would you say, okay, this is, like, how would you be able to discern if this is an issue because I am far from God and I don't have a good relationship with Christ, as to, hey, this is something serious that I should consider? Because I understand, like, there are some mental health issues that, like, you definitely need to
Right,
address.
right.
But there are some where, masalan, pride,
Right.
for
Totally.
a better example, it could stem from a religious lack of understanding or lack of belief or whatnot. So how would you be able to make that decision? And I guess at the same time too, I think like as the Coptic Church, we always try to stay away from therapists. Like, oh, you're crazy if you go to a therapist. And that's like the
Right.
so how would you be able to balance that?
Yeah, so it's a very good point. And I'll tell you two things that I want to say about that. The first part, in terms of, if it seems like it's hard to distinguish, like, is this a spiritual problem or is it a psychiatric problem? You know why it seems hard to distinguish? Because it's hard to distinguish, right? And the reason for that is the reason there's a whole profession of people that are trained to answer that question for you. So my advice to anyone, like if I'm in those shoes, right? Like let's say I'm dealing with something that's not my like go-to. Like I had a really bad cough last week. It's a true story. I wound up having strep. Deadly disease. I wasn't sure because my specialty, I'm not a pulmonologist, right? I don't know if this is strep, if I'm being a baby, high likelihood I'm being a baby, but I'm not really sure. Or about to start, this is like some explosive like lung disease. So I didn't know, so I went to someone who was gonna answer that for me. Because if it's clear for me and I can trust my judgment, like no, I'm being a baby, I'm gonna take like Robitussin and I'll be okay. But when it's unclear, I guess my point in the example, I hope it's not like too facetious, but like if it's unclear, I err on the side of, let me go to someone with the training who's gonna tell me. Half the people I see, not half, that's a high number, but a good percentage of people I see for evaluations, I say, you're good. Good, go to your priest, you're fine, no problem. And that's part of the role of an evaluation. We sometimes think, if you go to a therapist, ha, they got you now. You're locked in for life. It's not the case. If you go to someone for an evaluation is just that. Part of an evaluation can say, in the DSM, there's a category. The DSM is the thing that psychiatrists and psychologists use to make a diagnosis. There's a part that says spiritual problem. I don't know if you knew that. That's an actual thing. Someone could just say to you, Habibi, you just have a spiritual problem. Confess, do some atanyas, go back to your priest, figure it out. Or they can say, you know what, and this more often than not, this happens so much. I just had someone email me this last week. we can make our mental health problems look so spiritual. It's like, dude, just because your anxiety is centered around spiritual things doesn't mean they're spiritual. Just because your depression has a spiritual flavor, where you're like, I'm so depressed and I feel like God hates me, but it's because I sinned, and it's just digging and digging and digging and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of depression. And you can spiritualize it all you want. You can put a Tonya on it, sing a hymn. There's still, the treatment involves therapy, psychiatry, and your spiritual care. So the short answer to that, sorry, it's a long-winded question, is I encourage you, if you're on the fence, to get an evaluation from someone who can give you that answer. And then two, we as a church, just to make a categorical statement, and Abuna can back me up, we as a church, there is the church practice of stuff, and the church belief about stuff. The church practice is therapy is evil, we don't do therapy. That's the practice sometimes. We say that, how do you not? Come on, man. The church belief, the doctrine, what we stand on stuff, is we absolutely, wholeheartedly utilize these services. Therapy, medications, and the reason I can tell you that categorically is because there's a clinic in New Jersey, there is a clinic in Florida, there is something in LA, the bishop endorses it. So it's important to remember that, to say even if someone, and again, forgive me, like I know, right? Even if, I've seen this before, even if a bishop, not like your local bishop, because I've seen this where a visiting bishop will come and say, oh, like, medications are not good. And then thankfully the local bishop said, say it, of course it's not, doesn't mean that, it's not.
So that's the
Yeah, exactly.
the devil inside
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
It will go away.
Right. So that happens, but even if you hear that, that's not the position of the church. So that's why I'm saying that very clearly, right?
Yes, of course.
Thank you, thank God. That's good news. Sorry, I think we're, right? We're good. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate your time. And I'm just going to leave the books here for you to peruse through, and I'll leave my cards as well. If you have any questions, you can text me as I'm stuff.
Do you have a top one?
The top one, emotional health spirituality is really good. You mentioned. I like this one for talking back, because I'm reading it now.
Meaning you could download that, by the way.
You download it? Okay. There's always a way to pirate things. I don't endorse stealing from. So that's what I want to do back.
Okay, I'm sorry, I've told Mina a very small practice, but I think it's important right now. Right now, a practice that we're going to do. We will sing a very small song, even if you don't know it, it's fine, it's just this wording. We'll do it for 4 or 5 times. You can close your door. And we will give you 2 minutes silence after this song. It will be the longest 2 minutes ever in your life. Let's try.